of that, Linda. Living in West Boca, Montoya Circle. Yep. So I'd like to get started. I'm sure Avi has other things to do today, and everybody here has probably a schedule that is just incredibly busy. So let me just introduce Avi Gordon. He is the Executive Director of Alums for Campus Fairness, and we're going to learn a lot more about that organization as we go along. Avi has spent many years now in pro-Israel campus community activity. He worked with an organization that many of us really hold in very high regard, and that's Stand With Us. We have had a wonderful relationship, Avi, with Stand With Us, and have visited with them in Israel and Yerushalayim in their headquarters there, had some wonderful sessions there and here as well in our synagogue. Avi was also involved as campus director for that very wonderful Jewish frat AE Pi, and he was also the most recently AJC, the American Jewish Committee's New York Associate Director. He went to a small university upstate New York known as Binghamton University. So did the children of many of us, I'm sure. And now, as I said before, he resides in Boca Raton. And Avi, it's just a pleasure to have you with us today, and thanks for making time to join us. Would you like to begin with just an overview of ACF, and then we can get down to some questions?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here with me today and for learning together. These kinds of opportunities are an honor for me and for the organization. And I think it's important for all of us to get together as much as we can during these times and to learn together. It's funny you said a small university in upstate New York in Binghamton, because I'm from Pennsylvania, and almost nobody has heard of Binghamton, where I'm from in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But my mother suggested I apply there, and it was a great decision my mother made for me, basically. And now I'm very proud Binghamton Bearcat alumnus. So getting into ACF, who we are, Alums for Campus Fairness was founded about 5 years ago by our three co-founders who all went to Vassar College outside of Poughkeepsie. And what they were seeing as alumni was anti-Israel sentiment kind of going rampant on campus. Professors, sharing their own personal agendas, the anti-Israel movement being strong, calling for a boycott of Sabra hummus on campus because it helps it helps fuel the occupation of Israel over the Palestinians, and it's just very. It was kind of just, there was no other side, there was no balanced argument or conversation or anything like that. And so our co-founders got together and they were able to bring together about a dozen alumni who were concerned, and they wrote to the president and they kind of shared what their concerns were. The president had no idea who Students for Justice in Palestine were. They had no idea what these anti-Israel professors were sharing as, their teaching, of course, has nothing to do with the conflict or Middle East, and they're sharing their own personal views. Fast forward to a few years later, they created effectively the first chapter of Alums for Campus Fairness, and now they have over 200 alumni of just Vassar College who are part of our chapter there. And so what we do as an organization is we are the unified alumni voice on campus. We help, we want to help counter bigotry. We want to help counter the anti-Israel sentiment that's going on campus. We arm alumni with information through webinars that we have. We have weekly webinars now that we're in these trying times. Our social media is very strong. We have regular news updates. We help guide our alumni to publish op-eds, have open letters to the administration. And so, what we're doing is we're bringing together on a grassroots level alumni of any age in any school across the country to come together and to help counter the bigotry that's going on. And so today what we have is, we're fast forwarding now, is we have about 40 chapters across the country with over 6,000 members. And those chapters are anywhere from UCLA to Binghamton to Columbia, NYU, Michigan, and I can keep going. You can see our full list on our website at campusfairness.org. And so we're really kind of working together with alumni to kind of come together in an organized fashion. And because with my experience working in this pro-Israel campus community for 10 years now, with our relationships that we've been able to establish, we're working with, with students on the ground, we're working with professors and the administrations as well. So we're really a part of this kind of multi-pronged approach for the first time ever. So we have students who work on campus. That's one of the components. We have professors. We have the actual players on the ground like Hillel and Chabad on campus with whom we work. And no one's ever really tapped in before to alumni until now. And so with us working together with this multi-pronged approach, we've been able to really make strides in shedding light on what's going on campuses, because many times we find that administrations don't necessarily know the full picture. And as alumni, we have a seat at the table, and we have a voice in what we think is going on or should be going on instead.
Avi, can you take us through the following? Help us to understand what is ACF's normal process that you go through and that your executive board goes through in trying to determine what you respond to, what you don't respond to, and then how do you choose, how do you decide from a variety of interventions what you're going to do?
That's a great question. So we really try to be, first of all, obviously we want to help the chapters that we already have established. So our chapters are run kind of as their own entities with us, but at the same time, we are the ones as the professionals, we're guiding them towards their goals. And so what that means is that we have our chapter can have a president, an executive board, which we call our core, and those are kind of the decision makers, and we speak with those decision makers. And then we have our general members who don't necessarily have the time, but care about what's going on and want to sign on to a petition or what have you. And so when we see things that are happening on campus, because as I mentioned before, we're a part of this coalition within the pro-Israel campus community, we hear from Stand With Us. We hear from the Israel on Campus Coalition, who's kind of the umbrella organization that helps bring everyone together under one roof. We hear from all of them about what's happening. We're on conference calls regularly so that we understand the implications of what's being said. And many times, sometimes it's not warranted a response because it was a blip in the radar. It's kind of just so you know, there was some type of program on campus. There was 3 people there who were talking to themselves. But sometimes, and many times, it's warranted to kind of pull back the curtain and be more open about what's going on. And so we work directly with all of the many organizations, and then we are able to really bring our alumni into those front lines and to get them fast-paced, up to date with what's going on, first of all, and also figure out together what we should be doing as an organization, as a chapter, to help the students on the ground who need our help.
Are there any common threads when you think about campuses, East Coast, West Coast, we're all over the country? Any common threads to the kind of activities on campuses which bring a response from ACF? Are there any common threads?
I think the common thread here is the demonization of Israel, and that it's being used as, no, we're not anti-Semitic, we're anti-Israel. That's the common thread here that we see everywhere. And what we're seeing, actually, more than, especially for me working in this community for 10 years now, the anti-Semitic tones aren't being aren't under wraps like they used to be. They're a lot more outward. The anti-Israel movement is a lot more outward in their anti-Semitic themes, in their thoughts. and it's really it's becoming more and more of an issue. And it's also becoming, frankly, easier for us to do our work because it's not as hidden anymore. It's not as hidden as it used to be with the anti-Israel movement, the Students for Justice in Palestine, and the like. They're a lot more implicit with or explicit with their work, and it's scary to see. Students are facing way more on the front lines than we've seen before. They're facing a lot of heat, and what we have to keep in mind is that the students, the pro-Israel students, the Jewish students, the Zionist students they're in university to learn. They're not in university to have these war of words or to have or to be attacked because they're wearing an IDF shirt on campus or a kippah on campus even. And I think that's that's what makes our work even more vital, because the administrations aren't necessarily seeing what's happening. And those who are, we certainly thank and recognize and work with them on a daily basis. And those who aren't, we call them out and want them and call for them to make sustainable changes.
Avi, I want to follow up on something you said there. And I see that Jody Turk Goldberg's on the call. I didn't see her before. I want to thank Jody for really connecting us some months ago, actually, and I really am appreciative of that. Avi, can you help us understand? Because, we hear that there's anti-Semitism. We hear that anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism has gone over into anti-Semitism, that it's now, and you're saying it, that it's much more overt. Can you help us understand what is considered anti-Semitism on a college campus today? Can you give us some examples of where this would be found on certain campuses? How it manifests itself from being just criticism of Israel to now full-blown anti-Semitic actions, attacks, whatever?
It's a great question. I think anti-Semitism in some ways manifests itself as clear as daylight, where we've seen, at Columbia University, a professor outside of her office, swastikas were scrawled right outside of her office. When I worked for AAPI, the Jewish fraternity, swastikas were literally graffitied onto our fraternity's houses across the country. So there's one thing that's very clear as day. In other ways, they're saying that Jews are the reason for X, whatever it might be. So I'll give you something specific is intersectionality. Intersectionality, the concept is where organizations kind of come together because they both are struggling, or they're both advocating for something, and they should support each other and come together as organizations. So for example, Students for Justice in Palestine will go to the Black Student Union and say, you are upset about inequalities about what's happening on campuses, or you don't think you're being well represented. And we feel the same way as the occupied people in Palestine. And let's come together. And so what they're doing is bringing everyone together under one roof and kind of attacking communities, attacking the Jewish community and the pro-Israel community. But back to your question of we're seeing kids getting scared of being scared to wear kippahs on campus, or being scared to, have an Israeli flag that's being waved, that's an Israeli flag that represents the Jewish people, that's being torn down, burned, openly. I mean, these are things that are happening on a very real basis. It's just becoming more visceral. It's becoming more tangible than a war of words. It's becoming a real venom that's being felt by the students.
Are there any campuses, Avi, where you feel there are administrations that are particularly historically reluctant to face anti-Semitism down? Do you find that there are campuses where your intervention, the intervention of ACF, is not wanted, where the administration would prefer not to respond to these manifestations of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism going overboard?
Absolutely. I mean, I can, the two biggest ones that I think that come to my mind right now are Columbia University and NYU. I kind of think of ourselves in a couple of ways with them, is that we're a thorn in their side, number one. And number two is we're chipping away at their armor. We have a lot of prominent alumni who are under our auspices and who have a lot of influence at both of those schools. And we've had direct contact with President Hamilton at NYU, President Bollinger at Columbia. And unfortunately, there hasn't been much movement, and they're not, Columbia, for example, will share with us after we create a petition or speak with the administration directly that we recognize these issues, but we should also recognize that we have Columbia has a phenomenal Hillel, the Kraft Center of Jewish Student Life, and they have a great study abroad program at Tel Aviv University. Both of those are very true. The Hillel director is fantastic at Columbia. The center is great. The study abroad program is fantastic as well, and shouldn't be ignored. However, that doesn't solve the problem at hand of students feeling unsafe on campus because they're Jewish or pro-Israel. So we're it's a deflection as opposed to an admittance of these are some things that we need to really kind of handle face on. And I think with Columbia, especially, we came out in October, so a little over 6 months ago, a dossier of sorts, we called it a hotbed for hate. And it was about 35 pages of detail the last 3 years of incidents that have happened on Columbia's campus. And we were able to share that with the press. We got featured in all the Jewish press, but also Fox News, and the New York Times was working actually on an article with us, and then the pandemic happened, so it kind of got shelved for a bit. But needless to say, that I think that kind of helped open the dam for things happening at Columbia University for changes to happen. And so actually most recently, I think it was the beginning of April, if I'm not mistaken, students were still, even though school was closed at Columbia University, they were still going to vote for BDS resolution on campus to boycott Israel on campus. Even though, again, everything was closed, they were going to do it virtually. And President Bollinger, for the first time, came out with this statement against the BDS movement and calling it anti-Semitic in nature. And that was really the first time we saw what was happening at Columbia. We saw kind of like a small change. I would say also the executive order of President Trump for Title VI also helped with students kind of come forward.
Which was used at Columbia.
What was that?
Which was used for the first time, invoked for the first time at a student at Columbia.
Yes, there was actually 2 cases at Columbia that was used. That was I think helpful, and we'll see what happens. I mean, the jury's still out, but they're both under review, which I think is incredibly important and an important step forward at Columbia. So again, there is a lot of room for improvement there. We're a thorn in their side. We're chipping away at their, and we're hoping that, we have to think about this as a marathon, right? Not just a sprint to the finish. This is a long play. And similarly with NYU, President Hamilton has had many issues and hasn't kind of come together with the type of leadership that we're looking for. Similarly at Tufts University, just recently SJP won an award by their peers. It's, I'm trying to think of the right word to use. It was a collaboration award, I think is the right word. And the collaboration award was something that we found to be completely egregious. And Tufts has had an issue up in Bedford, Massachusetts, with SJP being very strong with the students feeling marginalized on campus, the pro-Israel students feeling marginalized on campus. And President Monaco, after us, we've had many conversations with him and whatnot. He came out with this statement saying that this outcome of students arrested in Palestine receiving the collaboration award should not have happened. They recognized that the award was caused a great deal of pain or concern for Jewish members. I mean, this is like an outward statement that I think was very important. And so, what ACF does is not only reach out during, these negative times, but also recognize the positive and thank them for it. And so we thank President Monaco for his strong statement at Tufts, and we sent him an email with our 100 alumni and parents of students. And he sent a correspondence back thanking us for our leadership and for supporting him during this time, because I'm sure he was facing a lot of backlash from the other side as well. So it's important to have that balance.
Needless to say, if you had 10 times the membership of ACF, you would carry a lot more clout into these discussions.
Absolutely, and you know what? With that being said, we're growing regularly. That's why our social media posts have helped us grow. We have over 10,000 followers now on Facebook and growing. And I encourage everyone here on this call to go to campusfairness.org. On the top, you can click sign up. Tell us where you went to school. Maybe you have a grandchild who's a current student now, or a child who's a current student now, and you can be a part of the chapters where they attend as well, and be heard and be a part of it. We send regular emails to Columbia or to NYU or to Michigan saying, here's what's happening at Michigan. Here's the 411. Here's what our next step is. Please fill out this petition or call the administration or do X, Y, or Z, and share this with your network as well. And so to that end, when I started working at ACF, which was more than 2 years ago now, we had about 2,500 members. So we've more than doubled in membership, and we're continuing to see that growth. So to your point, we are growing and we will be growing, and we're very fortunate to be able to be where we are today. And the trajectory is only going up from here.
Beautiful. Rabbi Dermot, you have the host, that you're the host. Would you have some questions for Avi, and then maybe you can moderate some other questions from our community?
Absolutely. I mean, you spoke, Avi. First of all, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I know it can be challenging, and you can face backlash, as you mentioned, from some of these universities that are a little bit more stubborn on this issue. And I often hear from parents about some of the schools that you mentioned, UC Berkeley, Columbia, NYU, and Jewish parents sometimes speak about these schools as schools, God forbid I should send my student there. I would never want my student to go there, because why should I spend $40,000, $50,000, whatever it is, so that my student could be subjected to that kind of environment, an environment where they might be intimidated, where they might be harassed, where they might have a professor, like professors at Columbia, who cancel classes to go to pro-Palestinian rallies and all sorts of things. Is the guidance to parents, and this is something I think a lot about, how to respond to these parents, is the guidance to say, yeah, you're right. Don't touch those schools. Pick a different choice. I don't blame you for not wanting to spend that kind of money to support that kind of institution? Or is the guidance more to say, well, no, we're fighting the good fight here, and we're making progress, though it's slow. And actually, if your student wants to go there, they should go, and they should go with a courage and with a strength, and armed with the facts that they'll need to be able to respond. And they should put themselves into that tough situation, but for a purpose. I mean, do we say there's a lost cause when it comes to colleges? Berkeley, NYU, where the culture is just is so difficult that we might as well say, well, if you're a Jewish student, let's focus our energy elsewhere.
It's a great question. It's hard to give a blanket yes or no, because I think it depends also on the climate itself, and also on the staff, of the Hillels, of the Chabads, et cetera. So first of all, I think it's imperative for high school students who care about this to join the likes of, Stand With Us has a high school program. They have fellows, they have Team Leadership Council. There's also, and they've been doing it for, I want to say, like 8 years now, and they've really kind of perfected it. And actually, they just got word that students who are part of the fellowship can get college credits now as well, which is phenomenal news that just happened last week. So that, first of all, will help kind of prepare them for college and prepare them with the right words to say, right things to do, number one. Number two is, I think it depends on, what's happening on campus as far as your Hillel, your Chabad, are they strong? So at these certain schools, they're stronger than others. And sometimes, I'm always of the like, don't just, wave the white flag and say we're not going to go. If there's a strong Jewish community, which at Columbia there is, at NYU there is, at UCLA there is, that you should be a part of that community, but also be prepared that it's not going to be all roses and peaches, and that everything's going to be great. That you can and will perhaps have the responsibility to stand up and to say something. And now you shouldn't be like a personal hero and be the hero of a class of 300, in a lecture hall, but rather maybe you should go to meet with the professor privately afterwards and just understand where he or she is coming from, and have them understand also where you're coming from. Listen, I had, Binghamton is more than a third Jewish and is an incredibly safe place, I would say, to go for Jewish students. With that being said, I was a Judaic Studies major, and actually the dean of the Judaic Studies was, he was extremely left, and, talked a lot about occupation and what have you. And I am more centered than he is. Not right, but I'm more centered than he is. And I talked to him a lot, Professor Karp, Jonathan Karp. I talked to him a lot. I had a lot of conversation with him, and I also wrote a lot of papers that were in direct contrast to what he believes in. And I did that, frankly, on purpose, because I wanted to see for myself, would I be graded fairly, number one, and number two, that we can have this kind of discourse in a respectful way, and we did. And I think that for me, I really enjoy it. I enjoyed being challenged, and I think that's like where we should be. I mean, the college, the campus community is a place where it's a marketplace of ideas. You're supposed to disagree with people. You're supposed to have these kind of life-changing conversations, arguments, learning opportunities. But the difference is that when it becomes this kind of when it goes into, first of all, anti-Semitism, or when you're being demonized because you believe one thing and not another thing, that's when it becomes more of an issue, and that's where we have to stand up and speak out.
I'm glad you had that experience.
Can we open it up to some questions from our community?
Yeah, why not? That would be good. I see a couple hands. You could also send me in the chat if you'd like to write out a question. But I see George has a question, so I'm going to unmute him, and then I see is that Barbara? Let's start with George.
Help me understand, in my lack of understanding. Does ACF have offices on all the campuses? How do you get the input of where their problems are? And how do you then disseminate those problems and make other schools aware of what the problem may be at a particular school?
Great question. So our professional staff is in LA and in Boca, and our leadership of chapters are lay leaders. And so we hear about things going on through our own research, through our partners, and they share with us detractor programs that are happening on campus. We then get in touch directly, if they don't already know, with our lay leaders for what's going on, to tell them what's going on so that we can collaborate. We can share with them what are student groups doing on campus, what are the Academic Engagement Network, the organization that works with pro-Israel professors, what are they doing, and how can we fit into this puzzle as well? And so we kind of are able to, as the professional staff, bring in the full picture and to share with that specific chapter, here's what's going on, and let's work together to help them figure it out. And so the way that we disseminate it then is that by you signing up on our website and telling us you went to University of Michigan, you're therefore part of our Michigan chapter. And so within 10 seconds, through our own internal systems, we can send an email to all people who say that they went to Michigan and say, this is what's going on campus. Here is a petition to sign and to share, and it goes out within seconds. And so that's how we're able to have these kind of rapid responses when things happen, and are able to also work with our lay leaders on issues that might happen. And sometimes we disagree with our lay leaders, and that's okay. It's a working relationship, and sometimes also students aren't necessarily able to do a certain action on campus because they're worried about the repercussions. And they ask alumni to, I like to say sometimes, to fall on the sword, to take the blame for things that are happening, take the blame or to call out something in a more pronounced way than students would, because they're worried about any type of repercussion. And that's something that alumni don't have to worry about. Alumni help control or help influence donations and also the reputation of their alma maters. And those are big things that, that administrations care about. And students sometimes feel like they're handcuffed just because of maybe it's the climate on campus, maybe it's that they don't want to get any type of academic repercussion, and that's where we come in as well.
Can I just, one follow-up? Do you work in concert with Hillel?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, we have, as I mentioned before, we have a weekly webinar series. And in our second week, we actually had a conversation with the new CEO of Hillel International, along with Chief of Staff. And they have a whole department that works specifically just with the pro-Israel community, not Jewish identity, Jewish education, but Israel advocacy and education. So we have a very close relationship with them.
Thank you.
Yep. Joseph.
Avi, just a quick question. When we had that incident, I guess it was about 2 years ago with the University of Michigan, the professor who refused to sign a letter of recommendation when one student wanted to study at a university in Israel. Did ACF have any intervention in that matter?
That's a great question. And the short answer is yes. We actually, we didn't have a chapter there yet, but we had people who are in our system who went to Michigan. Once this happened with the professor refused to give a letter of recommendation, we mobilized. We told those who we knew who went to Michigan that this was happening. Within 48 hours, we had 500 members, 400 members of a newfound chapter at University of Michigan. We created lay leadership in the drop of a hat. The leaders who wanted to help make decisions with our staff. And we were a part of the conversation. We had conversations, our representation had conversations with the administration. We share with them talking points. And we're a part of all the conversations with students and whatnot. And I think that, because they were hearing from students, from faculty, from their Hillel on campus, and from alumni, that they made some very important leadership decisions that were strong. The professor got sanctioned. He was disallowed his sabbatical. And I think that they did a great job in kind of understanding, the administration did a great job of understanding what the issue was and making wrongs right. And we were absolutely a part of that.
Yasher koach on that.
Yep.
Are there some other questions?
Joseph and Barbara have
Yeah, it seems to me that we're always talking to ourselves. We're reaching out to the Jewish students and telling them how to be strong and what they should do. And we're not reaching out to the campus in general. And I'm afraid that we're having an entire generation of non-Jewish students who are buying into this Palestinian rights idea and are becoming anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. And as time goes on, they're going to be the people in Congress, the people in positions of power, and we're not really reaching out to them to get our point across and to counter what Students for Justice in Palestine and other groups are putting out there. For example, it always seemed to me that every time you see this Israel Apartheid Week with a bunch of students standing there with a fake wall and a checkpoint, we ought to have a group of students across from them with a fake rocket launcher pointed at the dorms to show what these people really are, that they're terrorists. And yet I don't see any of that happening. I don't see us being proactive. We're always responding. They say we're an apartheid state. We say, no, we're not. It seems to me that there ought to be active programs on campuses showing what Israel really is. The types of things that I see on my computer from World Israel News and outfits like that ought to be available, whether it's through the Hillel chapter or sponsored by some other group, to have a weekly, a monthly, whatever it is, film presentation of the good things that Israel is doing, that are happening in Israel, where Israel is reaching out to the rest of the world. And also, we ought to be, as I said, with the fake rocket launches, highlighting what these people really are. They're not downtrodden people who are being put upon by the Israelis. They're terrorists. How can it be that we're constantly being outmaneuvered and out public relations by a bunch of terrorists?
It's a great question on a few levels. So first of all, there are a lot of programs that are being done to counter it. However, one of them actually that comes to mind, it's like what you mentioned, is actually there was a Pinocchio out on Columbia's campus, and that was basically to show that there's these lies that are being shared, and therefore Pinocchio's nose gets longer. It was like a blow up thing. It was an extreme kind of response that some thought were it was too much, some thought was a great response. But I will tell you the reason why the SJP is getting is able to kind of get their message across in a better way is, first of all, they're better at coalition building in some ways. Our students are absolutely our students. The students that work with the organizations on campuses directly are being educated, are trying to work with as many student groups as they can. They're certainly behind the times, as SJP and the like have been doing it for a very long time and are very effective on it. And the reason why they're effective on it is because they're pulling the victim card. We are the victims, the Palestinians are the victims, and you should join us as the victims, And so it's easy for students to say, oh, they're victims, they're being harassed and attacked and, at checkpoints, what have you. Like, obviously I'm going to support them. Why would I support this Goliath that is Israel? And that's inherently an issue on campus, is that, unfortunately, the message isn't being shared as an effective way as possible. What I will say is that at the same time, that students are getting more and more innovative on campuses in the pro-Israel community. There's been the likes of Israel Peace Week. There's been the likes of Stand With Us has an Israel Matters display that directly contradicts the apartheid walls. And those actually were even happening when I was working for them, even as late as 2014. And it's still happening. And those are, the Palestinian, wall of lies. Here's what they're saying that's not true. Here's the Hamas charter that says that, we want to kill not Israel, but Jews themselves, etc. And so there's a lot of different tactics that are being used, but I'll tell you that a lot of times students walk by and see these kind of extremist, let's call it, displays, and are turned off by it because they don't want to be a part of anything extreme, or they don't want to be a part of anything that's controversial. So it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you obviously want to call them out for what they're doing, but on the other hand, you also want to be able to have as many listeners as possible from the outside. The 80% who don't know anything about what's going on at all. It's honestly, it's a conundrum. There's no like silver bullet here that will have it go, that will have it work. But I think that the students are, first of all, the student needs are changing. The student itself is changing. So, we're in this kind of cancel society now that didn't exist even 5 years ago, where, it's a lot more sensitive in that way. And so, the students are adapting as well in what they can and should be doing as far as messaging is concerned. So it's a little bit of a different conversation. And it's frustrating, to be sure, because, it seems like, to you and I, this is such a simple thing. But on the college campus, it's unfortunately a lot more convoluted and confusing for them, because they don't want to be offensive, but they also want to stand up for what's right, and they want to be heard, and they want to be, accepted with their peers. It's a really hard, conundrum to have.
Avi, how much more time do you have? Do you have another 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
So another 2 or 3 quick questions?
There was a question from Linda. I see Sarah has a hand up too, from Linda Rosen. What, if anything, is being done to educate high school juniors and seniors? And I know that this isn't exactly your purview, but you might have a perspective on it, to educate high school juniors and seniors about this issue, about anti-Semitism on college campuses, what to expect and how to be best prepared.
Absolutely. So there's I mentioned before, the Stand With Us has a high school program where they have student ambassadors, student fellows, like high school student fellows, who bring programs to their schools, and their staff also goes around and shares and educates about what's going on campuses and what to expect. And they've been doing it for many years. There's also a new organization that's based in San Francisco called Club Z, And they've been great in kind of bringing together, similarly, pro-Israel students, having them bring innovative programs on campus and to educate them and to be prepared and to kind of, it's almost like a easy progression of, okay, I'm a high school advocate. I'm sharing educationally what's going on about Israel to my high school peers, and then they're able to take a leap into college and to be able to be way more active and to be a way stronger leader on campus. And so, what we would love to see is, someone to go from high school as a leader to college as an activist, and then to an alum with us, and to be involved there. And so some of our best leaders are actually past fellows at all the different college, pro-Israel college programs, like Stand With Us, Emerson Fellows, ICC Grinspoon Fellows, Hillel, ambassadors, etc. Those are some of our best leaders, and ones to understand, and even the ones who just graduated understand the recent campus climate and what can work on their alma mater. So certainly lots going on in high school. There's, they're growing. I think Stand With Us has grown to many, over 100 high schools they've worked with, and that number's growing. And same with Club Z, their numbers are growing as well. They're in San Francisco, I believe, maybe Berkeley, they're in LA, and they're in, I think, Brooklyn as well. And they're growing, whereas Stand With Us is all over the country.
One more question?
I see some questions coming in. It have a question that has to do with the application process for students applying to colleges. It's a question from Jody. We want to be pro-Israel on our applications. How would schools look at applications for a semester in Israel or Alexander Muss? There's a concern with that amongst parents, perhaps.
Interesting. I don't think it's an issue. I'll tell you, for me, I went on Young Judais's year course, so I did a gap year between high school and college, and I didn't think it was an issue. In fact, it's almost the norm now to do these kinds of gap years. It kind of gives you a more worldly, global understanding of what the world is, and I think it's only positive. I don't see going to Israel specifically with Muss or any of the other to be detrimental. If only, I think it will be helpful to the application. I haven't seen any stories or heard from anyone firsthand on anything that's going on, or anyone who's applied and thinks that they didn't get into university implicitly because they put that into their application. So in that sense, I think we're in the clear.
I had kind of a quick talkless question, a practical question. I saw on your website that some of the power that you wield as an organization is the ability perhaps to influence alumni to withhold donations from institutions. I thought that was a really interesting take on this situation and how we might respond, one that I hadn't heard before. Has it come to that? Have you requested that alumni hold back on any contributions that they make until a school has come to a certain point?
It has. I mean, we consider that kind of like a last resort, right? We don't want to, use that as the carrot, as a carrot or anything like that. But I'll give you an example of something that happened last academic year, and that was at Pitzer College, which is a small liberal arts college in Orange County, California. There was a call to end the study abroad program with, I think it was the University of Haifa. And it was the only study abroad program that they had with an Israeli institution. And the students voted for it in favor. Maybe it was the professors who first did, I'm forgetting the order, who voted to do it. And the chancellor was getting a lot of flack, and he was not gonna pull out. But what was interesting is that we actually started a petition. When you're at a small liberal arts college like that, there's not a lot of assets on the ground, right? There's not a lot of pro-Israel students there or knowledgeable students, and it was asked from the coalition for the alumni to kind of step up and to first of all find alumni, identify them, and have them spread about what's going on, and start a petition calling that this is one-sided and bigoted. And that's exactly what we did. We were able to get 200 signatories on our petition. from basically like 2 or 3. One of the things we do is, we do paid Facebook advertising to reach those kind of people, to get them to understand what we're doing. And what we learned is that there was a student on the ground who knew what was going on. She worked in the development office of Pittsburgh College, and said that she was receiving calls from alumni saying that we're not going to donate this year until this is solved, because what's happening is unacceptable. We did not call for it explicitly, but obviously it's the alums' choice. It's their choice to make that, and we haven't done something like systematically per se, but I think that did make a difference. The chancellor came out and did not support it. There was call again to do it, and he wouldn't do it. And then likewise, we sent a letter to him on behalf of 200 alumni. Thank you for your leadership in standing up against bigotry. So those things have happened where donations have been withheld, and it's been noted by the colleges or universities. But I think of it as a last resort. I think of it as something that, if we're pushed to a corner, that's something that we can and should do. Because obviously that's important to the universities to have their donations and their endowment be secure.
Avi, thank you so much for this time and for sharing a good deal about ACF and the incredible work you're doing. Avi, every year comes Sukkot, I give a sermon, it's called the Lulav of the Year Award, because the Lulav stands up straight and tall and has a spine to it. And I give the Lulav of the Year Award out to anyone who really stands that way as a Jew and sometimes a non-Jew. And I want to thank you for being a lulav of not only this year, but every year, because this is an important fight. And I want everybody on the call to know that just go to the website, sign up, be there listed as an alum of your college. Urge your friends and family members to do the same thing. And what a world of difference that will make in terms of growing the numbers of this important organization. Avi, in a certain sense, someone said to me about 2 weeks ago, don't you wish that we were back in the good old days when we weren't talking only about coronavirus, but we were talking about anti-Semitism? And so this is a transitional talk. This is, our way of saying, it's time to get back to that agenda. We've been dealing with the coronavirus, and yes, we know the tragedy, we know the catastrophe, and it's all around us. And we don't close our eyes to that. But there is a wide and important Jewish agenda out there also that we've got to return to. We've got to get ready to get back to. And this is our opportunity to, in a sense, begin to turn the page and to address those issues that are there for us, that will always be there for us. And we're just very appreciative that you're in the leadership of the important campaign taking place to help students, our children, grandchildren on college campuses, and professors who are victims of this kind of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist hostility on campus. So keep fighting that fight. And again, please, if you're on the call, join, become a part of this organization. Thank you so much.
Rabbi Klein, thank you very much for your help. And just so you know, during this time of the pandemic, things are still happening on campus. There's still, anti-Semitic things that are happening, and our work isn't over, unfortunately. Even as recently as on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, there was graffiti on the UMass Amherst Hillel building. Things are still happening, very much so, and it's important for us to stay active and to stay in the know of what's going on, and to keep kind of vigilant. So I want to thank you all for being here on this call and for joining me and for learning together. And thank you for the opportunity, Rabbi Klein, and to Jody as well for making the initial introduction. We're really appreciative of it. And I welcome having this conversation in the near future as well. I'm happy to address everyone again.